When we talk about environmental problems, we usually jump right to the science and the tech, right? We talk about carbon capture, solar panels, recycling rates. But today, we're going to go a little deeper. We're going to explore the why behind it all, looking at our moral relationship with the planet through the lens of environmental ethics. And this is the big question, isn't it? We've got mountains of data. We have decades of research telling us exactly what's happening to our world. So why does it feel like real, meaningful change happens at a snail's pace? Well, the answer, as we're about to see, often has less to do with the data and a lot more to do with our values and our morals. Okay, so first things first, let's lay the groundwork. Why do we even need a special field of ethics just for the environment? What's the big deal? At its heart, environmental ethics is all about figuring out what's right and wrong in the way we interact with the natural world. See, it's not just about what our technology makes possible. It's about what's permissible. It makes us ask some really tough questions about what we owe to the planet and, well, everything on it. And this field is more urgent than ever, really for three main reasons. First, our technology is just insanely powerful now, and it has massive, and I mean massive, consequences for nature. Second, we know so much more about the global scale of our impact, things like climate change. And third, our own sense of morality is evolving. We're starting to ask, should our moral duties stop with humans? What about animals, or trees, or entire ecosystems? Do they have rights? All these things together are forcing us into totally new ethical territory.
All right, so to understand where we're going with all this, we first have to understand our starting point, a view that has pretty much dominated Western thought for centuries.
This is what you might call the default setting for many of us. It's called anthropocentrism. Basically, in this view, nature's value is all about how useful it is to people. A forest is valuable because it gives us timber. A river is valuable because we can drink its water. Its worth is defined entirely by our needs. This is the mindset that lets you clear-cut a rainforest for farmland without even thinking about the forest's own right to exist.
And this idea goes way, way back. I mean, check out this quote from Aristotle. For thousands of years, the philosophy was pretty clear. The world was made for us. And that worldview has had a profound impact on, well, everything in our modern industrial world.
But as our impact on the planet grows, a lot of people are asking, is that human-centered view really enough? So let's look at how our perspective is starting to stretch and expand. This is the question that really kicks the door open for new environmental ethics. If we only protect what's immediately useful to us, what happens to all the parts of nature that we don't find useful, or whose value we just don't understand yet? That question forces us to start looking for alternatives.
So the first step away from that purely human first view is stewardship. This idea changes our role from being the owner of nature to being its caretaker. We're still pretty central in this view, but now we have a moral duty to manage and protect the natural world, to keep it healthy for future generations. We're partners with nature, not its conquerors.
Now, biocentrism takes a much bigger leap. It expands that circle of moral concern to include all living things. This means a giant redwood tree or a blue whale has a right to exist just for its own sake, not because we think it's beautiful or because we can make something out of it. Its value is inherent. And if you adopt this view, you have to fundamentally rethink a lot of things, like industrial farming or animal testing. Then there's ecocentrism, which blows that circle wide open. It says that the entire ecosystem, the whole community of life, including the non-living things like rivers, mountains, and even rocks, has moral value. This is the ethic that talks about learning to think like a mountain, understanding that every single part is connected. Ecofeminism comes at this from a completely different but really powerful angle. It argues that the same mindset of domination that has historically led to the exploitation of women and minority groups is the exact same mindset that's responsible for exploiting nature. So instead of control and hierarchy, it proposes an ethic based on care, relationships, and kinship. So expanding our view of nature is one huge piece of the puzzle. But what about how these environmental issues affect our own communities? This brings us to the absolutely critical concept of environmental justice. Because here's the hard truth. Environmental damage is not an equal opportunity problem. It doesn't hit everyone the same way.
There's procedural inequity, where rules just aren't applied fairly to everyone. There's geographical inequity, where, say, one community gets all the jobs from a new factory, but the community downwind gets all the pollution. And then there's social inequity, which shows how these decisions often fall along racial and class lines, creating what are called sacrifice zones, places that are forced to bear the heaviest environmental burdens.
And it's really important here to get the difference between equity and justice. Environmental equity is about fairness within the system we already have, making sure the laws are applied equally to everybody. But environmental justice, that's a much bigger, more proactive goal. It's about fundamentally changing the system to make sure everyone has a right to a healthy environment. And it's about empowering communities to tackle the root causes of these problems themselves.
Now, you might be thinking that all these ethical ideas sound pretty modern, right? But what's so fascinating is that the core concepts, well, they're not new at all. In fact, they echo teachings that are thousands of years old, found in major religions all over the world. And there's this powerful, unifying theme that runs through so many of them. Across incredibly different cultures and faiths, you find this recurring idea of stewardship, that the world is not ours to own and exploit, but that it's a sacred trust we're supposed to care for. And I mean, just look at this, it's everywhere. Hinduism teaches that all life has equal value. Jainism is literally built on the principle of nonviolence toward all beings. Christianity talks about humans being caretakers of God's creation. Islam sees humanity as guardians, not owners. All of these ancient traditions have a powerful environmental ethic baked right in, reminding us that respecting nature is a deeply, deeply human value. And as we start to wrap this up, this quote from Margaret Mead just feels perfect. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed by how big these challenges are, but history shows us, time and time again, that change is always driven by committed people who decided their values were worth fighting for. Our ethics aren't just abstract ideas, they are the fuel for action. So we'll end with a question for you. We've gone on this journey from a totally human-centered view to one that embraces all life and even entire ecosystems. Our ethics literally shape our actions, and those actions define our future. So, as the circle of moral concern keeps expanding, where do you see yourself standing within it?